Resize a Vintage Pattern with Me Part 1. I'm going to make this top from this 1940 book by Gaisita de Campos named Como Fazer o Meu Tricô. Here is the top. When resizing a pattern or modifying it for your size, you can find three situations. 1. You can have a pattern that will give you the gauge and the measurements of the garment. You can have a pattern that will give you one but not the other, and you can have something like this one that doesn't give you either. This is actually one of the easiest cases to solve because you will work with the stitch numbers the pattern gives you, and you will find the gauge that will give you the size you need. This one only gives me the initial stitch count, which is 108 stitches, and then I made some calculations to find out which gauge I needed to cast on this many stitches to get to my bust size, which is 86 centimeters. First, I had to find out this amount of stitches. And since this pattern doesn't tell me the checkpoints of the amount of stitches, I had to count row by row of the lace to see if they added or subtracted stitches from the total stitch count. I found out they don't. Then this is worked straight. Here I will have the same stitches I cast on, so I can work with the 180 stitches. And then I made a lot of calculations here. At first I have divided my total stitch numbers by the centimeters I wanted to get to find the number of stitches per centimeter that I had to cast on to get to this measurement, almost 2.1. Then I multiplied it by 10 and it gave me a gauge of 21 stitches in 10 centimeters. I'm not working with row gauge here. That's another issue for another step of this process. We're only making the initial calculations here. Then I just verified here by a rule of 3 and I found out that this calculation was correct, so I'm good to go. I also will make the same process to find out which gauge I should have for the ribbon, because I want this to be cinched to my waist. So I work here with my waist measurement and I will make the same calculation and determine the gauge I want my ribbon to have. If you want to get to another measurement, use another gauge, you may choose other yarn thickness to may be able to use the same pattern. But I already have the yarn and I will now determine the needles I have to use for the main body and for the ribbon, and I will do that by swatching for both. Wish me luck. I see you in the next part of this series. And you're invited to follow me. I will be translating the instructions. If you want, you can knit it with me.